So anyway, I get woken up in the middle of the night in this hostel in Belgium, and I hear this, these like bestial noises somewhere in the place that I'm staying. You sure you want to record this? Anyway, just kidding. So I'm talking to people, and I realize that the conversation that we're having is so utterly esoteric that there probably are only 2 or 3 people who could possibly participate in it. There maybe used to be some, but they're dead. And so now we're down to just these couple of people who say, man, did we have the guts demo? Was the guts demo right there in the stadium? And nobody, anyway, it's a funny thing, this shared experience we've had.
And the we is a big we. Been a lot of people over a lot of years in a lot of places, as odd as the hostel in Belgium, and many, many, many other places and times, and gatherings that hadn't existed in the decades before the whole thing started.
I generally, when I get into a conversation about the Frisbee family writ large, I say, well, I'm pretty sure there's some sort of a connection between dart players, but I just haven't ever come across, and I'm looking for them. I haven't ever come across any network fabric of relationships that is as rich and deep as this, to the extent that, and my example typically is that either one of us could talk with people we've never met before, incidentally, around the world, all night about shared understandings and experiences. And maybe some of it is because we have these multiple disciplines that spread it out. I mean, like shot putters get together, and they talk about, wow, Brian Oldfield, what a guy, but then it's still just shot putting. Whereas for us, we're going, wow, were you in Rochester when Ferens threw the killer shot down the hill to secure? He was only 16. He was only 16 then, and well, let's not talk about that anymore. Let's talk about Vingerelli and Snapper. Man, what a DDC team. I mean, they were like impenetrable. Oh, let's stop on that. Amy Beckon, did you see she's won the discathon, but she misses the final Mando and loses? Oh, let's stop talking. I mean, it's just, there's so many places to go that it's just nuts. Really.
And across the years, because people may have been 16 when they entered the sport, but so many have stayed involved in various ways. And if not at the playing level, then in the collecting level or the documenting level. Yeah. I see people, for example, in the military, and they get together and they have these intense reunions, but nobody's flying anymore. It was just that one moment in time. And then, our whole thing is just kept on going.
Well, there's something, I believe there's something, well, it's social, but it's also, I believe, kinesiological in that, well, first of all, let's talk about sex. Let's talk about sex. There is clearly something that is throwing a ball like a girl. We all know what that looks like. There isn't anything that is throwing a disc like a girl. There's throwing effectively and not effectively, but there isn't anything that is throwing like a girl. And of course, the women that are playing now may make that even more clear, that you see, oh my God, my role models are mostly female throwers, of people who I'm trying to emulate. And there is also something about aging. That is, I periodically get to play with Kirkland. He's still executing as he always did. And probably the results are close to the same. It's hard to measure it because, of course, we've had technological change in that time with the materials, and he has learned techniques that are probably more effective now. But when they used to roll out Arnold Palmer for the opening of the Masters, I mean, we're going, oh man, this guy, and he's a shadow of himself.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, Nicholas just kind of sweeps it out there like he's sweeping off his front porch. That's not the way Johnny Sias and Kirkland and uh, Pete Shive when he was at his best, and Pete May and hopefully me. I mean, I'm throwing more effectively now than ever in my life. Faster, um, cleaner, and a lot of that is learning. But I'm saying I don't think I'm noticing a real impact of aging on the kinesiology of the motion. I'm sure. I mean, obviously, well, the weird thing is I weigh exactly what I did in high school basketball. Now, what we know is that the mix of fat to muscle is very different. I can't just jump up and dunk it, so things have changed. But all in all, when I go out to throw, I don't ever think, oh wow, I could have done that when I was younger.
Yeah.
That's true of many other aspects of life. I mean, even, climbing up some rocks or something, I'll say, wow, I'm not as agile and nimble as I was before. But I don't think about it when I'm throwing discs in general, so
You,
I mean,
you
golf in
also
particular.
you also mentioned how the technology itself, the evolution of discs, you think about the molds, the plastics, weights, the shapes, the aerodynamics, not to mention the change in some of the other elements of the sport, the pole holes, the different markings. How many sports have gone through that kind of incredibly dynamic, constant evolution of the actual implements of the sport itself?
I'm going to
Golf
take that
clubs.
as a I'm going to take that as a sincere question. Um, well, um, I will give you one dramatic example, and that is I'm so old. How old are you then? 75. I'm so old that I began pole vaulting with a bamboo pole.
Yeah.
Okay. Then we upped that to, and Dad was kind of on the cutting edge because he was the track and field coach as well as football at the college. So then we got a stiff metal pole. It was a gill. It didn't flex at all, but it was a lot more durable. Then came the brown, and this was the huge breakthrough, of course, came the brown fiberglass pole, the beginning of that. And then, of course, it was game on after that. And people like, at that point, the high schoolers were breaking Olympic records because these fiberglass poles were so different. And there was a huge discussion in track and field of where these old school jumpers were saying, hey, okay, it's a new sport, put it with gymnastics. This is an actual argument they made. Put it with gymnastics, but it's a crime. It's a crime to say that all of these old records with stiff poles are history when anybody can break it now with these springs that they're using. And the track and field people ciphered on it for quite a while and said,
No pole vaulting.
it's just the way it goes. I'm sorry. We'll look at those records and we'll know you guys were great, but we're on a new path now.
Yeah.
But we're still going to call it the pole vault. Sorry.
And in our case, that was discs for distance.
Yeah.
Yeah. And golf, of course, exploded and still does. Interesting. Fascinating.
You look at those old distance records and you say, wow, I guess Bob May wasn't too good. Yes, he was. He was really good. He was throwing 110 gram pro 100 yards.
Yeah.
Send Eagle out and see how he does with that disc. I mean, so anyway, it's fascinating. And probably more interesting and complex. And that's another one of those sit down with, pick anybody at the golf course and sit down and just say, talk to me about your bag. You know, what do you got in there? You got 34 discs. Talk me through them. You know, oh my God, that's a whole afternoon. The guys, well, anyway, I've got this beat up Stingray. I had an ace in this one. But anyway, the thing with this one is it turns over, but not as much as the new Stingray. You know, I mean, oh my God. It's
And worse if you walk into the guy's garage and it's covered like the wall behind you.
Yeah. It's really true. I mean, it's been, and one of the interesting little twists on this is that early in the going, when people were going, well, why is skateboarding leaving us behind? I mean, when we first came out to California, we were doing gigs with Tony Hawk and those guys. We would show up at the same gigs,
Yeah.
you know, and then all at once they kind of began to make the move into the big time, and Thrasher was selling. How are they selling, you know, surfing magazines and Thrasher in Oklahoma City? You know, that, but anyway, we were still trying to sell Frisbee World, and they go, well, what's wrong? And I said, well, it's because there's no way for the sport really to make much money. I mean, you buy a $5 disc and you're set. That's it. You're done.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no money there. And so, and now there is. I mean, you look around and you see all the accoutrements, and, you know, now you go to a fly mart and, you know, your mind is blown by all
and that's
stuff.
just the discs. You know, there's all the tournaments and the prize money and the sponsorship and the public. I mean, it's become a completely driven, and it's interesting that you mentioned the idea of money so early in the conversation about evolution of the sport. You've gotten intensely involved from the very beginning in the evolution, documentation, development, continuous improvement of multiple disc sports. Flying Disc Federation, Ultimate, Golf, Double Disc, Discathon, you name it. In the early days, it was that beach hippie thing. It was that fun play. And you and I had a lot of good times in that, where we had festivals. So whether it was the Smithsonian or the National Series, there was always that playful element. What are your thoughts about that? About how the playful, let's go out and have a good time, have a catch, watch what the wind does with the disc.
You know, it's one of the disappointments, surprises, I think, of my life in the game, that the idle fun back and forth that you're describing has, to my knowledge, almost died away. That is, the last time we were in Australia, I can remember clearly walking almost the complete length of Bondi and not seeing a single pair of people tossing disc back and forth. That's also true. Janet and I do a lot of beach camping. Almost never see two people just tossing a disc back and forth. Lacey Park here in San Marino, 4th of July, in the 70s, there was an area the size of half a football field that was a Chuck and Huck center prior to the fireworks. Washington Square, around the fountain. You just went there. We were just talking about it on Facebook the other day with Joey and others. You just went there, you tossed your disc into the maze, threw it back and forth, caught, do whatever, playing flies up, whatever game you wanted, and then 3 hours later, you hoped you could find your black master, and then you went to do whatever you did. Really, basically, to my amazement, none of that exists anymore. And I don't know what happened, because I would have thought that we did enough and showed enough to have people begin to get why tossing it back and forth is more inherently interesting than just tossing a football, which you still see, or a baseball, or whatever, back and forth. Because I would have thought, in the same way that every little kid wants to dunk or wants to shoot 3-pointers, I mean, they've seen the good people and they want to emulate them, and they never broadly adopted the, oh, I think it's that they tip it a couple of times before they catch it. It's, even when you did see people, here comes this beautiful floater. Oh my God. That's like killing a kitten. You know, I mean, you had this beautiful potential and you just crushed it.
Right.
We never did it. Now, that said, when's the last time you saw a recreational rollerblader? I mean, there was a time when it was everywhere down our streets, Venice, everywhere. What happened to it? It just absolutely disappeared. I mean, such things do ebb and flow. There's no question about it. And it's almost impossible to tease out what's wrong with rollerblade. I mean, right now, our tennis courts, our recreational tennis courts in the area are essentially vacant.
Yeah.
In the 70s, you were queued up waiting to get on and then arguing about whether they got to play more than one set. Now, of course, those courts are crammed with people setting up pickleball nets. There just aren't recreational tennis players. What's wrong with tennis? There's nothing wrong with Wimbledon or the top level, but somehow there's been a disconnect, in the same way, kind of, that when you watch the Olympics, and who doesn't love gymnastics? I mean, you look and you're riveted to it. But I didn't go out and buy a pommel horse.
Or
You
go
know,
out and try a cartwheel.
I'm a spectator and I'm going, ooh, ah, unbelievable. But I I don't even consider the possibility of participating. So maybe that happened to us. I mean, freestylers are better than they ever were, better in some sense. But it's not being generally practiced.
So you started what you just said here by talking about your life in the game. You didn't say my life in the sport. Is that pointing towards this fundamental, a game you play, a sport you compete? Is that part of what happened as flying disc evolved into a whole universe of very clear competitive rule sets, winners, records, tournaments, and the same people who otherwise might have been the players became the competitors?
Well, uh, I I always realized that I was kind of the prime mover in the codification, let's say, which was kind of the first step, the codification of what it was that we were doing. Um, and I mean, even at the time, I recognized it, and out of one side of my mouth, I was organizing things, and out of the other side of my mouth, I was saying there is no activity so essentially enjoyable that the fun can't be organized out of it. I mean, I knew that was the case, but I was willing to give up. I was getting paid to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the goal, to get more people playing, which meant spread the word, which meant, well, what's this thing? What can you do with it? Well, flat flip, fly straight, tilted flip, curves, play catch, invent games.
Games.
That kind of, if you look at like some of the prefaces that, like maybe the preface that I wrote for Charles's Frisbee by the Masters, I think at the end of it I said, this is our invitation to you, and we invite you. We sketched out these early descriptors of the play, but we invite you to elaborate on that and make it bigger, you know, invent games. And I was always delighted, sitting at the Resolute desk, I used to call it, at the desk at IFA. It was a very rare week that someone didn't get in contact and say, I have invented the best Frisbee game ever. And we go, okay, all right,
Yeah.
great, let's hear about it. Let's hear about it. And he goes, man, we're lifeguards, and when it's raining, nobody comes to the pool. Here's what we do. We got, 3 diving boards, and the people standing, you jump off the diving board, and then you catch it, you throw it to the other person, that's a point, and then you catch trick catches more. It's unbelievable, blah, 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 blah. It's such fun. And that was common. And we never discouraged anyone.
Yeah.
I mean, we never said, oh, sorry, buddy, we already have ultimate, we already freestyle, forget that. I mean, we just didn't, because we felt that that was one of the great assets of this tool.
Yeah.
That could be used to explore different ways to have fun.
And maybe still is. Like, if you look at the Olympics today and you see breaking as an Olympic sport, I got to go back in my decades and go, hold on, that's a sport? I mean, how did these guys get in there? And one day we'll see ultimate or some other flying disc sport as a Olympic recognized already, but let's see it in the actual Olympics. I wonder if disc sports will go through some kind of similar evolution in years to come, that new ways to play and have a competitive element so that people can score it and win in it and compete in it can emerge. The early days, the bounds were endless. Anybody could show up with anything, as you're citing.
Well, let me approach that a couple of different ways. First of all, I was in a super fortunate situation to be at the timing that I was relative to the development of disc sports.
All of us were who were involved in those years.
Well, yes, that is true. We got an opportunity, and because of primarily the phone call from Ed, I really got the golden ticket. Yes. Of the opportunity, the bully pulpit, but it was a pachinko ball deal. It could have gone blink, 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 and then into the no point zone. But for various reasons, including that Ed decided to resign not too long after he brought me on. And I said, Ed, hey, I'll go back and finish my doctorate. Just tell me, I don't want to undercut you. If you're walking out, I'll walk with you. He goes, you're already here. You've got your desk, you might as well stay, which he probably regretted in the future sometimes when we went head to head. But then I'm Mr. Frisbee. Spud and Rich are going, tell us what you need. And so then there's regional directors and the magazine blows up and mail order and the North American Series and all of those things that probably if Ed had still been there, I'd have been kind of restricted in what I could do. And so then, my God, and the comparison, like I probably spent, I know I spent 1,000 straight days playing tennis through college, either teaching, competing, playing, and more basketball prior to that. But I never got a chance to make a scintilla of difference in those games. It was too late. was too late. They didn't they didn't want to hear from me that, well, wouldn't it be cool if there were two balls in play? I mean, have you guys ever thought about that? First of all, you'd sell more balls, not just from a marketing standpoint, but hello, click, hello, hi, hello. We're done, buddy. We've already got the game. I mean, so that was lucky for all of us, as you say, to be the sky's the limit, and that was timing. I mean, it was timing in the same way that Naismith got to say, well, I wonder what if we took the bottom out of the peach basket? I mean, that'd be faster, right? I mean, and he didn't have to go through a committee. When I, near the end of my career, went to Mattel Sports, so this is Whammo, Grantsco, I still had a tremendous range, still a little more oversight, but they didn't know exactly what I was doing still at Grantsco. When I got to Mattel, it was welcome to cubicle world. I was just another guy in that cubicle, and I began to realize the limitations of oversight. And now it was, well, if you want to do something like that, that'll have to go to finance, and then finance will move it up, and it'll eventually get to the VPs, and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And my ability to just willy-nilly, I mean, benign dictatorship is the most effective form of government if you got the right dictator. And fortunately, people gave me an amazing amount of latitude when you think about it. I mean, they trusted me.
And by the time you earned the trust, by the time you stepped out of that particular corporate environment, there were enough other commercial players. The sports had evolved to the point where you could continue vigorously and have other sources of power and participation and budget than just one company. But you're right, those three companies really gave you tremendous amount of rocket fuel to take this sport into stratospheres it never would have otherwise reached without some platform for you and the authority then for you to be, and you're a unique guy, a tremendously unique guy in that way. So I'm kind of intrigued when you look back and you realize how much effectiveness has consolidated around this organization that you kept wanting to see happen and has happened and has involved so many other people. And yet you use this cute phrase, throwing my life away. I'm not sure Michael Naismith would look back on basketball and say, well, I just bounced my life away. Created a sport. He was very aware of it. You've created a lot. What do you mean by that phrase, throwing my life away?
Well, ironically, it's a good catchphrase. Did you see what I did there? See, it's a catch and throw. Okay, I don't think I've ever said that before.
That's always been part of you. That's true.
I don't think I ever said that before. God, how did I not think of that? Anyway, I think one of the things about it is that I've already mentioned that I felt lucky. When I look at people who I hope are happy in what they do, let's say current James Taylor, I wouldn't say he was always happy in what he did because he had his demons, but now he seems to be happy to tour. He puts out new music when he cares to. He has audiences that love him. He's got at least one or two of his sons who come along and participate. He's got a loving wife who also sings. And I figure there's got to be a happy guy. I mean, Bill and Holly Wright. I mean, they're in the right spot. They have a lifestyle that they love. And I know a lot of other people. I hope you're happy. I mean, I often use you as an example of somebody who made the life they want, and it happened. I hope you're happy with it. I felt blessed that it was never clear whether I was working or playing. And I would actually use as my opening line when it came to be compensation time at Whammo, that I would sit down and I would say, okay, Bob, if it was probably Bob Gardner in the beginning or whatever, I'd say, let me start with this. You can't pay me enough for what I do for you. And incidentally, you wouldn't have to pay me anything. So given that, then go ahead and tell me what we're going to do. But the fact is, you've got me over barrel. I love doing this so much that I would do it for nothing. So I know that's a really hard-nosed bargaining point, but you saw it from the inside. I mean, when we were working at our hardest, pulling off a national festival or a US Open with 400 players in 10 days and 7 events with 3 rounds each, it was killer fun. I mean, for me, a lot of the most fun was the staff meetings. I mean, the after where we're sitting there, we're going, how did that go? Come on. Did we kill it today or what? And that's when I realized, and looking back on it in particular, because I love those people. I mean, those people who helped make that happen. I mean, that was the tribe. And I realized that, like your work, which is, I think if you boil it down, it's talking about creating experiences for people. And we were creating experiences not only for the players, but also for the spectators and the people who were delivering it. Everybody, the goal was for everybody at the end of that to feel empowered, inspired, strengthened. If we had people going away who were disappointed, shortchanged, unhappy, then we hadn't met our goal. Right. And one of the big advantages was, particularly when we were doing it repetitive times at La Mirada, is if you remember those staff meetings, we were taking copious notes at the end of every day of going, okay, it was a great day, but was there anything that we could fix next year? We've got accuracy going on at Benton. And I noticed people were getting in here late. They were getting in here late for the barbecue. Is that running too late? Are there not enough targets or what? Because I don't want somebody arriving and saying, hey, what's the deal? Are you out of the baked beans? I don't want that. I want them coming, and when they arrive here, they're feeling comfortable and I'm right where I'm supposed to be. And we can fix that if we can fix that with 2 more targets next year, let's do it. Amy, write that down. 2 more targets for Benton. Next, and that to me was huge fun of tweaking it, getting feedback from people. And the fact is, when you hear from people and you talk with people on, in particular, Facebook for me is the primary driver of this, people say that those experiences were some of the best of their lives. I mean, people who went to the WFCs, they say, I can't describe it to you because it was heaven. I can't describe it to you. I mean, it was, that experience was heavenly.
Stork, you gave me the microphone for the WFC in the Rose Bowl. And I can remember, the winged hat and the clipboard and the stuff that would come in. And I just got the privilege and the pure joy of playing that role. I was one of your gang that was in the staff that was gathering. And I think now this helps me understand why you're so passionate about consolidating the methodology, whether it was in the rules or it was in the manual or it was in the checklist, because you wanted other people to be able to do this in places where you wouldn't be there, but you knew there was a certain chemistry to make this actually. You wanted to enable other people to be able to do it.
I think it comes back to that of saying that you want people to have the most satisfying experience that they can have. Now, let's realize back to kind of the beginning of your question, that can bang up against the zero sum of competition. That is, once you
Yep.
get to the finals of the National Ultimate Championship, we're going to send away one set of people sorely disappointed. They reached the pinnacle, and their goal all season was not second; it was to be the champions, and that's a very difficult thing to solve. Now, when we go back to Bernie and World Games and that kind of thing, they solved it by saying, well, let's sidestep it. When someone scores a goal, then we switch them to the other team. Okay, and we're so amorphous that we can't even at the end identify. We're all winners. We are all winners. Well, yeah, that works. It's a way around it, but there's such compelling models in the rest of sport / the world that there was a tremendous appetite for, I want to know who's the best disc golfer in the world. And we're going to have a system to find that person. And only one person is going to have that title. And that's why in the bit of influence that I still have these days, in especially disc golf, I press large format team play as I believe it's the answer to many things, and that is a 36-person team that now has different components of, there's open men, there's open women, there's masters women, men, down all the way to juniors. They go and play. Oak Grove plays La Mirada. Now we have many more winners. And the other thing that's interesting about it is that down deeper in the thing, the top people like Stevie Rico, and Owen Scoggins, they've had this winning experience many, many times. But our person who's playing 24th, they maybe have never been the winner. But today, they're playing the 24th position from La Mirada, who is in a similar place. And guess what? Their point counts exactly as much as Owen's or Stevie's. Exactly as much. Wow. I mean, that's galvanizing of where they're really a significant part of this competition. When I go to an open competition, I sleep like a baby because there's no pressure on me. I'm not going to win. But if I'm in a team competition, wow, they're counting on me.
They need you at that super masters level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that, I think once team play gets traction, and don't think of it as just 36, because the online membership list for Oak Grove these days is 800 people. So there's 12 teams there that can get exactly the same experience, and it doesn't matter that they're not, I mean, track and let's go back to high school track and field. People aren't thinking they're going to the Olympics. I mean, I played high school track, loved it. You lie in the grass and stretch and they think you're working out, and it's great. It's great fun. I didn't ever think I was going to go to the Olympics. I didn't even think I was going to do it in college, and I was correct, but it was still wonderful fun because they created the opportunity for me.
Well, and you were a member of a team of people who were going to compete together against another team. It harkens all the way back to when two villages would come together and they'd have these, annual gathering. There'd be a whole series of different sports that were played. But the point was these two villages came together. including all the
Yeah.
food that went around it and the people who met each other. Made me think as you were speaking about how this phenomenon of collecting emerged very early in the game, very early, like the earliest discs, the pie tins from Bridgeport, Connecticut, were already from the beginning. I don't know how many golf players really think about, collecting early golf balls, but you had this thing going along on the side where you didn't need to compete. There was the issue of who had that, Kirkland's collection always being bizarre, you always being an odd source of whatever came out. But or Dan Buckley and I roaming around Bridgeport, Connecticut, and finding yet another pie tin case, and that provided for people more of that village element, that we could have the disc swap area, or we could just be showing and talking about, and it didn't have to do with a competitive element.
I well, I'm always trying to look for analogous things, and like you say, I mean, I'm certain that there's a national golf ball collector conference, but um, that it's also that these discs carry with them. Hold on just a second.
Uh-huh.
Here's an Octad Super
I knew
Pro.
you were going to pull that one. That's
Oh, see, it's more impressive if you say Octad Super Pro before it appears on the screen. Do you want to do it again, and you can then cut it in? Anyway, that this
Stork, I know because
about,
it's the same one you took down from the wall the last time I interviewed you
oh,
decades
I see.
ago.
This we could talk about this disc for an hour.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much built into here of this is Hendrick's reaction to the CPI, and Octad, 8 different events. What were they? Blah,
Two
blah,
different
blah.
color hot stamp, tournament hot stamp, not a label.
Man, it still feels really great.
Yeah, still one of
Anyway,
the greatest discs.
yeah, man,
Still one of the greatest discs.
Mm.
You mentioned one person's name here, and back in the early days when you and I met, I was in Europe and you heard about me, and we did some correspondence, and you really enabled, encouraged, what do you say, empowered, inspired, strengthened, and left happy. You wanted everybody in the Rose Bowl to feel that way, and everywhere else throughout the sport around the world, but you also did it on a personal basis. And thank you, because you opened up that whole world of disc to me larger than it already was. And as you know, I took it on and ran with it. When I came to IFA and saw you at the Resolute desk, and I still remember exactly which side it was pressed up against and how Joe Cahow was on the other side. And there were a few people there who I got to know because they were around you, and it was part of that working ecosystem together. And I just want to name a few of them. Some of them are still with us. Some of them are no longer in their bodies, but they're still with us here. And just hear some of your thoughts. But I also want you to offer up some of the folks who were really early core. You mentioned Ed, you mentioned a woman named Amy. I know you mean Amy Berard. And I recall that there was Joe Cahow and Al Bonapane there. A little bit of Tim Selinsky, and then there was Tom Baudet on the side. Those are the first 5 that kind of come to mind. Danny McGinnis when we got into the festival world, and then Mangoni, of course. Don't know if you recall that list, but I'm curious just to hear a couple of words from you on each of these.
Well, back to our thing of conversations that you can only have with a few people. Not too many people could have as accurately named off those people as you just did. Patty Hipsky also on that list as another one of the core, and Linda Garcia, not a player, but early in that. And I'm proud and pleased that we had so little turnover in that gang. I mean, I guess it was cult-like, and I hope it was a fun, gratifying place to work. It was super flexible in that our hours were weird compared to, Whammo. Spud and Rich were out of there at 5. Boom, they're gone, which was great because that's when the mini golf tournament began, and one of the best holes was on Spud's desk. So, but we were I mean, weekends and weeks, as I said, you don't know whether you're working or you're not. That was the same. And so how do you handle that? I handled it by, on Joe's desk was a notebook, and you wrote your hours in there. And this is all kind of off the official record of Whammo, but you say, okay, well, we did juniors this week in Orlando, and I in total travel and down there, I was working for 200 hours. So you put 200 on there. Okay, now you use them up as you wish. You say, well, Sam's in a play this morning, and I wanted to go see it. You just take 4 hours off of your list, and obviously everybody needs to get done what they get done, but I wanted people to feel like they had autonomy. They had autonomy, which is all the happiness people say. Autonomy is like the most connected with happiness of anything in terms of work. It's why entrepreneurs are in general happier, even though they're working harder, because they at least have the sense that I wouldn't have to be working now. I'm my own boss, so I can stop if I wanted to, but anyway, I think that's part of the reason that people enjoyed it. We, when we had the IFA house, we would, make lunch in there, and people brought their animals. And I mean, I hoped it was informal and fun at all levels. I never liked to have it feel like there was this real strict kind of procedural things that we had to follow. And so anyway, all of those people that you mentioned were players in the play of that, and they all made their individual contributions that came from, it's a party and you bring what you can. And we tried to play to everybody's strength. And I think I think that we did that. When people look back on that time, they, I think to a person, say, wow, that was killer fun. I mean, Al and I often talk, and we have shared things that we know and we did that were just he and I. He was my number one sounding board in terms of, okay, geez, we can't have people running to the front of the court every time they get the disc, and what's the fix? And so it was really huge fun to say, well, we can't have an impasse. We can't have them continually having impasse. What if one of the teams had to throw? We designate one of the teams that they have to throw. So if there's even kind of the threat of an impasse, one of the teams have to throw. Well, we can try it. And that was the huge fun of it. We could just by fiat say, okay, gang, you all saw what happened at La Mirada. And so next week in Santa Barbara, we're not going to use 119s anymore. It's going to be the Wimpy Red Pros, because we think they'll be a little easier to catch. And once you catch the disc, you're in a similar to Ultimate, not pivot, but you can't leave that spot. Okay, so we'll see if that works. I mean, and wow, that was such fun. And Discathon, which began with speed golf in Belgium. That was my inspiration for Discathon. I said, this is great. I mean, it's just like biathlon in the Winter Olympics. That is, you got to ski your ass off and then calm down enough to shoot. and then ski, shoot, ski. I love that. And so then we said, there could probably be something like that with this run, because I wanted the overall to span different talents, and we didn't have anything in individual overall that really focused on more endurance running. We
Mhm.
had the running in self-caught flight,
Mhm.
but we didn't have the longer run. And of
Mhm.
course, a lot of people, when it came in, hated it because they didn't like the run. They didn't like the run. I mean, people hated it. When DDC came in, there were 3 people on the planet who thought it was a good idea: Palmieri, Jim Palmieri, and me. Everybody else said, LeBeau called up and he said, Stork, this is crazy. This is crazy. You're putting it in for points. I don't think you understand how important the points are. Do you realize that this is really important to people? You're putting this in, this completely experimental thing. You should do at least 2 seasons of testing it out before that. I said, well, if we do that, people won't take it seriously. It's a point event. Learn to play it. Wake LeBeau up in the middle of the night now and ask him what his most favorite game in the world is. DDC. I mean, a lot of people say it. Kirkland says it. It's his favorite game. Whitlock says it. It's his favorite game. Zimmerman, favorite game.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
nobody liked it.
You know, it was
Nobody.
interesting. You mentioned something else earlier where you said we've tried to play to everyone's strengths. And so you mentioned a guy like Kirkland who just had so many strengths and really, curated them, cultivated them to the point where he could dominate other people with them. Part of that's personality style, even in his collecting style, just John. But I remember when you were at the IFA house, it was not just play your team members' strengths and the player strengths, but people coming in from all over the world bringing different cultural orientations and different cultural styles. I remember the first time I saw urban freestyle, and I think it was the Japanese, who were
Yeah.
throwing it against curved surfaces and bouncing it down. Whoa, that was a completely different innovation. And I guess it would be like the early days of somebody inventing ball. Are you talking takraw ball, pool ball, medicine ball, rugby ball, football, soccer ball, and this whole world of ball sports? But nobody talks about ball sports.
Right.
But we do, as a collective family, talk about flying disc sports. I wonder if that's just because we're still relatively young.
Um, Speaking of that urban freestyle, I'm sure you've seen it, but if others haven't, there's a wonderful segment on that in the Invisible String. They spend a good bit of time following that freestyle collective in Tokyo. Um, and yes, I have some wonderful memories, and apparently others do. Like the Aussies are always talking about their visit to IFA when they first came to WFC, that it was like Mecca, and that they had a chance to sit down with me and they walked away like electrified. And now, incredibly, it's a huge part of their lives today. And that brings me to an interesting kind of, well, I guess it's related point. At the Freestyle Hall of Fame induction in Brooklyn a number of years ago, I don't know how many years it was, because did you hear, like, the pandemic years apparently are not being deducted from our allotted time on Earth? Did you hear that? It's like fishing. I think they don't count, which is cool. Anyway, there's a gap in there. I said, completely unplanned, I said to that collective group, I said, I want you to think with me for just a moment about what your life would have been like without the Frisbee in it. And not just the object, but the places you went, the people you connected with. Think about that. And amazingly to me, I'm almost crying when I say it now, the place was tears. I mean, it was difficult for me to continue, and there were people just bawling. I mean, because when we thought about that, I mean, I guess there's another life. I mean, I'm head of the sociology department at Occidental, and I guess I play pickleball and do whatever. It's not a bad life, but this unbelievably rich experience that we had, where we could, if we started the game of rapid fire back and forth, name somebody that we both know, we would be here for 10, 12 hours of just rapid fire back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And that's,
Oh, and then if we added to that, and remember when with that verse. So Stork, you just helped me see the missing component, not just that throw my life away, and it's a good catchphrase. I'm glad that emerged for you, and enjoy it as you share that with people. But the real thing was this: every single time you threw your life away, there were people to catch it and throw it back,
yeah,
and still are.
yeah. I mean, speaking again of the pandemic, it got me through it. I mean, I decided to completely, you may have seen the article, to completely rebuild the mechanics of my throwing. And I went to the field and trained every day before I felt comfortable going to the course. And then I started to play. I'm playing so much more recreational golf now than I ever played. I played this morning with Tita, Cliff, Dan Mangoni. I don't know if you know Casey Morgan. And we played, and we play 3 times a week probably, and train another 2. And that got me through. I mean, it re-energized me. It got me focused on physicality more than I had been. And that's, interestingly enough, it's so analogous to Dad, Papa Jack. He thought his athletic life was over at 40. Because remember, the first senior divisions in the Rose Bowl were 40 and above. 40. Okay, those were the old guys. And he was older than the others. But once he and Ed and Tang and Johnny and Ralph and Roy and those guys and Ken, once they hooked onto that, they said, okay, wow, I'm into this. And
Right.
I mean, it added 10, 12 years to Dad's life. I mean, he trained to play, he played, he competed, rode his motorcycle to compete. I mean, I can remember being in a motel room with him when he was, I guess he must have been ready to turn 80, my age. He was the guy was so damn old, he was as old as I am. Anyway, and I see he's got his flashlight on over in his bed. I'm going, Dad, what are you doing? My God, he started at 7 a.m. He says, I'm just trying to check here to see if Tang catches an MTA, then that means that I have to finish at least 3rd in discathon and go to sleep. I mean, this is a guy who's 80 years old that is that fired up.
Yeah.
And you see it particularly in golf these days. I mean, senior golf is huge, and it's all people who, without that, I don't know what they'd be doing. They'd probably just be kicking back and watching TV.
And the pandemic gave them a shot in the arm and in the butt to go out in the field. I mean, that Wall Street Journal article about what happened to the blindest manufacturers for disc golf during the pandemic just couldn't get enough plastic, and use that as a supply chain example globally. Boom.
Yeah.
Yeah. Your dad, very, very fortunate man to have a son who picked up on his passion and then opened it up as a space where he could continue to throw his life and have it caught and thrown back. Thanks. Thanks, Dan,
Yeah.
Ron, for all you've done for the sport and for so many people in so many places. And not just for the sport, for the game.
Well, it's been a joy. I know people say that, but it's true. I mean, it's been an absolute joy, and in particular, it's been an especially joyful thing to have done so much of it with you, and see how you've really been able to take a lot of the tenets that we developed and spread them even more broadly.
Mhm. Mhm. So there are going to be people watching this for who knows how many years to come. You get your final moment of speaking to the future. People who may be watching this when you and I are both not here in this body, but we're still here in this message.
Well, I hope that we have a world where people have even more space to have fun. Uh, not all futures necessarily go there. I think there is a vision of the world that I hope we will choose, that will give people that kind of latitude. I I hope that by then we will have solved what I think is a looming threat of vicarious life through device. And I hope that particularly children will still be experiencing the joy of traditional play. Um, and I know that may sound curmudgeonly, and that, well, you're not seeing the future, but I think there's a tangible, measurable difference between running, jumping, shouting, playing, rolling, tumbling, and thumb work. And I hope we'll find a way to uh, to live with those two things, because I don't underestimate how tantalizing and satisfying digital life is. I mean, we're all we're all part of it, but I hope we can preserve the opportunity to play with each other in the way that we've loved growing up.
Well, I know one of those ways that has been throughout my life and all over the world has been to pull out a round piece of plastic that has an aerodynamic quality and just go like that, and then go like this, and magic happens. I now walk around every day and carry with me a wand of soap bubbles, and I find that
Mm,
those work well too.
oh yeah, bubbles are one molecule thick, actually. Yeah, they're
I'm gonna be a little careful though. If I see somebody establish a resolute desk and say, "I'm gonna codify the rules for this," think how
bubbles.
many more soap bubbles you're gonna sell.
Bubbles might be harder to contain. I have you ever dealt with the huge giant ones
Oh,
that
whoa,
have a,
whoa,
yeah.
whoa.
Oh man, yeah, they're awesome.
Okay, I'll see you at the World Bubble Championships. I'm sure they exist.
Oh well, I mean, there's definitely people who make a living making bubbles. I
Right?
mean, street performers, and put squares inside things and put
Yeah.
smoke in them and that kind of thing. And I used to know a guy who was big into that. But yeah, I love them. They're in my play bag.
Bag of tricks as well. Right. Just
Oh
try
yeah,
hanging one on your wall.
good point. Good point.
Take care, Stork. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for this, Ron. I appreciate it.
Good fun. Who knows where it'll go, but I'll put it out there.
Good to see you.
Bye bye.